Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevicius. Thank you so much, Charles, for doing this interview. I was so delighted to meet you yesterday in this wonderful church. You practiced here for a few lovely moments here and played beautifully Bach's pieces and Gigu Toccata too. So, of course, you are a wonderful storyteller, and I was actually, my only regret from yesterday's conversation with you was that I didn't have my recorder on and didn't push the button. So, but I thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation one more time, and welcome to the show.
Okay, thank you. It's lovely to be with you.
Great. Charles, can you introduce a little bit yourself and tell us who you are and what do you do?
Well, my name's Charles Spanner. I'm an organist, and I particularly love taking choirs, and also a qualified teacher. I've been in charge of music in 5 schools in Great Britain, and about 5 years ago I formed a youth choir in Dover because the schools locally are not very good for choirs. They're not noted for choirs, and it's difficult to get choirs together where I live. So I formed a youth choir which has done remarkably well, and even only a couple of weeks ago we sang in St. Paul's Cathedral, London, which was a wonderful thrill for all of us, and Bath Abbey. So that was one of my greatest thrills this year.
Fantastic! I can imagine to be able to sing in such a magnificent cathedral, right? Not every choir can have this privilege, luck, right? Basically, so I guess your choir members are very, very happy, as well as you, right? And your listeners probably too. Can you tell us a little bit what did you sing at that occasion?
We sang "The Heavens Are Telling" by Haydn. We did something called the Rose Responses. A Magnificat and Nunc Dimittis by Harwood in A-flat major, and a song. Mm-hmm. And it went very well. And apparently, I heard only yesterday on a text from a friend in Dover, we are front page on the local press.
Fantastic. Of course, towns like Dover can be very proud of ensembles and groups like that, giving concerts in important venues, right? Going even abroad sometimes, and that's very, very good added value for the city too, for Dover.
Yes.
Right. So I usually start these interviews with the question that is, of course, very fascinating for all our listeners, right? Let me ask you for the beginning, Charles. How did you first fall in love with the organ? Do you remember the story?
Yes, I do. I was brought up in a place called Saltburn by the Sea, which is in North Yorkshire in Great Britain. Very cold. It's as I say, by the sea with lots of fog and sea frets. But I was lucky enough to become a chorister in a lovely church choir there, and there was a 3-manual Harrison & Harrison organ, and it wasn't long before I started to tinkle it and play the ivories there, and eventually I started to learn the organ at my local church, and it just started from it, snowballed, both my singing and playing, and that's really how I got into church music.
Fantastic. How old you were?
I was when I started the organ, I was about 14, 15 years of age, something like that.
So that's very formative year, right, for
Yes.
those for young boys. And usually, if you have a good experience with somebody from the adult world, pastor, priest, maybe, and seasoned organist, maybe experienced organist, showing him or her inside of the organ, right, letting touch or even play with hands and feet, that might lead to some interesting experience in musical adventures later on, right? So I'm very happy you met someone who invited you to sing, and you saw this Harrison organ, right? So what happened later, right? How did you chose that musical path?
Well, it progressed really. I formed a choir when I was at when I was about 16. I got a choir together and we sang Paris Blessed Pair of Sirens. I conducted it, and I entered my choir in some local Eisteddfods, and we came 5th out of 16, and I'd had no musical conducting training at that stage, so we were very clear, all of us, we were all just youngsters getting together. And again, things snowballed, and then I went on to university, where I had put down to do singing and piano, but in fact I changed from piano to organ, and applied on 2 occasions to study with Floor Peters in Belgium. And twice, once in 1980 and once in 1984, on both occasions I was accepted for a scholarship to study in Belgium with what can only be described as a great master.
Well, Floor Peters, that's the name that should be mentioned again and again in the organ world, because Floor Peters is responsible probably for many good things in Holland as a composer too, not only organist, right? And his music is very well known and very well written. It's a little bit on the conservative side, I would say, right? But that's good, right? Because people can relate to it, and it sounds quite understandable, because it's people who love Baroque music, right? Have a good grasp of Floor Peters' music, because he is just a few steps ahead, right, from the Baroque writing language, basically. He has some techniques and tricks of his own, obviously. And I remember yesterday, Charles, how you played this beautiful aria by Floor Peters. And before you played it, I was thinking, oh, I know this piece because everybody plays it, aria. But either because it wasn't familiar to me, it was maybe another aria, or maybe I heard it maybe 20 years ago. It sounded so fresh yesterday. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your experience with the great master Floor Peters.
He was very demanding, but in a very nice way. To tell you a couple of stories, one was a very, very fine organist from Germany was playing a piece by Peter Eben, the Multi Perpetuo, and it was a time when I think, with Floor Peters coming towards the last 6 or 7 years of his life, I think his hearing was changing, and Floor Peters had helped set up the stops for the piece to be played, and Martin Sanders actually started playing it, and very beautifully. But Floor Peters was cross because Martin put in some stops, some of the brighter stops on the organ, and Floor Peters was pacing around the organ loft, looking at us with his hands, clutching his hands behind his back, listening to the music, and his face gradually changed colour, and his expression from one of what beautiful music to one of annoyance crept over his face, and we felt there was going to be a volcanic eruption. And sure enough, Floor Peters went over to Martin Saunders and leaned over him, and he said, and he shouted from the organ loft, "I said piston number 2!" And he pressed piston number 2, and out came these other bright stops again, and we then thought we better not disobey the professor again.
Right.
So we had a chuckle over that. That was very funny.
Fantastic. Floor Peters, listening to the great music by another great master, right? Peter Eben, who is no longer with us, sadly. But Peter Eben left so many beautiful pieces, right? Like Moto Ostinato from the Sunday music, from the great cycle, but also other cycles like Laudes and for biblical dances, and the story of Job, right? The other biblical stories he likes. But basically, he was the great improviser, improvising storytelling events from the biblical, which later got written down by him and as completed pieces. So I can imagine Floor Peters having very, very, being quite as you say, cross with the student who took liberties with
Yes.
registration. And I imagine great master like Flor Peters could have strong opinions about how this particular piece should be performed and registered, right?
He also, we were very fortunate enough to go back to Flor Peters' home. And there was the console, the old console from St. Clotilde, which César Franck used to play. And of course, one burning question we had was, Professor, how did you get this into your house? I will tell you, he said. And it's a lovely story. It was during the Second World War. Apparently the console, original console which César Franck used to sit at and play, was redundant in the organ loft. And Flor Peters wanted the console, but the French apparently were not being very cooperative and letting him just take it. And during the argy-bargy, so to speak, and the crossfire, Flor Peters decided to take the law into his own hands, and he persuaded some American soldiers late at night to smuggle the console out of the organ loft, across the border and into his home in Belgium. So that's what he did. And there is the console. I don't know where it is now. But to add to that, of course, you have this wonderful console that was originally the one that César Franck always sat at.
Right.
And as an organist and a musician, I'm sure many of your people who are listening will know the famous César Franck pose, sitting at the organ, left hand on the manuals, and the right hand pulling out a stop.
Right.
Now, of course, we all wanted to mimic that as we came to Flor Peters' home. So there we were all sitting on the organ, having out the César Franck pose on the original organ. And there was a stop on the organ. We didn't know what it meant. And we said, Professor, this stop on the organ, we haven't met before. And the professor, he said, that is an interesting stop. He said, that stop works a little bell in the back of the organ for the little boy to work the bellows to make the organ go.
That's a great sense of humor, right?
Oh yeah, he had a lot of sense of humor.
Fantastic.
He's a great guy.
So, what happened later when you finished your experience with Flor Peters? Did you go to other places to study, or did you continue your own career?
What was very wonderful about coming on the Flor Peters courses was that there were all these students from other countries, one or two from other countries who had been selected, and we all helped each other. And from then on, in fact, just before then, my first occasion, I made my first visit to the States, and I gave 5 recitals. I gave one in a place called Lynchburg in Virginia, and then I flew over. Well, actually, I didn't fly. I took a bus, one of those Greyhound buses. It was a 3-day trip, and went to Seattle and stayed with the daughter of Lester Groom, who you might have heard of, who was then, he's sad to say he's died now, but he was organist of First Presbyterian Church in Seattle. And I had 4 recitals arranged for me across 10 days. So I had to try and keep a lot of new repertoire going. And one particular recital that I remember very well for all sorts of reasons. I gave a recital at St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle. Very, very fine instrument, Flentrop. And I practiced throughout the day, and it came to the evening, and there was a Compline service. And after the Compline service, I was to go directly into the organ recital. There were about 400 people there that evening, that Sunday evening. Now, I was ready to go up into the organ loft, but clearly there was no verger around to open the door to let me in. So everyone was waiting. Eventually, I was 10 minutes late in being allowed into the organ loft because they were trying to find a key. So, of course, I rushed up the stairs, sat on the organ stool, and very quickly, and perhaps wrongly, looking back on it, pulled out all the stops I needed for the first piece and played it through. Of course, I had started the piece I don't use the agitated state, but obviously in a slightly rushed manner. And we recorded the recital, and we went out afterwards for a pizza with Lester Groom. Now, Lester Groom was there, and I started the recital with a piece of his called Gothic Fanfare, a lovely piece. And I played this Gothic Fanfare, and he was, of course, sitting in the audience with his daughter. Anyway, while we listened back, having our pizza, we had a little recording machine, and I was horrified at the way I played it, because I had doubled the speed of the piece because I had started in a rush, and the piece was double speed. And there was Lester Groom listening to his piece played double speed at the composer, and I couldn't eat my pizza. I had to sit and I couldn't move a muscle. And he said, you know, it's very different twice the speed, isn't it? You know? And he was quite all right about it. But that was one of those embarrassing moments.
Of course, was it before the age of internet?
Yes.
Before. Now, I can add this, one comment to your... Now you can go to YouTube to listen to any recording, to any video, right? And you can put the settings to reduce the speed by half or increase the speed by half, and the level, the sound pitch level will not change. It will sound like
useful to
almost. If you don't have time, you can speed it up. If you have plenty of time and want to take dictation, for example, very slowly, somebody talking, right, lecture, you can slow it down. It will, of course, that person will sound like drunk, because blah, 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 very slowly. But still, as you say, you can play and listen faster and slower. But you did it before the age of technology.
That's right.
You did it very, very difficult thing yourself. Fantastic. And I remember you just mentioned Flor Peters and his students in a group setting, right?
That's right.
Doesn't remind you of a familiar experience people have while studying with other masters like Marcel Dupré and the blind German organist Helmut Walcha. Those were three names probably from the same.
Jean Langlais is another one.
Jean Langlais, of course,
he was blind.
very, very
I met him.
Great master. You met him, right?
Yes, I met Jean Langlais.
So this organ studio by Flor Peters was... do you still keep in touch with some of them today?
Very occasionally, but not for a few years. But I suppose as an organist, you occasionally have the unexpected. And on my tours, I have had some unexpected things happen. Needless to say, on one occasion, I was to give a recital in Warsaw, and I had done all the necessary preparations. The letters had gone back and forth, and I was nicely prepared for my recital in Warsaw. And they took me down to the church at 2:30, and the last comment from the lady who left me was, "It won't be long," sort of thing. And I thought, no, I've got a few hours to practice, I thought to myself. So there was I practicing on this organ. About 20 minutes after I'd started practicing, a young gentleman came in with some organ music. Oh, I said, "Hello, did you want to come and practice?" "Oh, no," he said, "I have come for your organ masterclass." I said, "Really?" I said, "This is interesting." And within 10 minutes, 6 students had appeared for me to give them an organ lesson as a masterclass. And the general public came upstairs, and you could seat 100 in the around the organ. And all of a sudden, I was thrown into having to give a masterclass for 6 students.
And the audience watching, right?
Yes, and I had no preparation. I hadn't really been officially told, and somehow nothing had been communicated to me. So off the cuff, without any practice at all, any preparation, I had to give a masterclass to 6 students. And that lasted a couple of hours at least. And fortunately, because I had enough knowledge and musicianship, I carried it through. But I shall never forget that.
How did you feel about it afterwards?
I was exhausted. I wanted a drink.
That's what you do when you're exhausted.
I wanted a drink. But that was not the only occasion when something was unexpected. I was in Sweden. I had given a recital at Stockholm Cathedral, and I was also giving a recital in a sort of theological college where they had about 150 students, and I had prepared for that, and I was having lunch with a number of people in the big refectory with all the students around me, and the gentleman said to me, he said, "We're so looking forward to your choral masterclass."
Choral.
Choral masterclass.
Right.
I said, "Sorry." He said, "Don't forget, you've agreed to give a choral masterclass." And I thought, well, so I said, "Please let me think a moment." So I asked him a question. I said, "Have you got any English anthems in your library?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Have you got sort of 50, because there are 150, so I said, have you got 50 sets of a number of Stanford anthems and Atwood and things?" And they had enough sets of English music, and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." I said, "But I wasn't prepared for this." So I busked a choral masterclass of English choral music with these students. Oh,
How did it go?
it went all right as well. They were all very happy. I got a big hand clap at the end.
So, but it was exhausting to you, right?
Yeah, it's more exhausting and nerve-wracking than doing. And if I prepared, I would have been happy. But it's just the unexpected that we always happens to all of us, I think.
Charles, you just mentioned the aspect of unexpectedness, right? Which happens so often, right? During church services, right? Or recitals. Sometimes some things go wrong.
Yes.
Pistons number 2, right?
Yes.
You got pushed, and what do you do? But of course, when you were asked to lead a choral masterclass, you had another option, right? You had an option to decline,
Yes.
right? But you didn't.
No, I didn't.
You didn't. And were you happy that you didn't actually?
I was pleased I had done it,
Uh-huh.
and it's a memory to always keep looking back on. But I was pleased I had done it.
You see, that happens in my experience too. Sometimes I remember one organ demonstration I supposed to give in the famous church here in town in Vilnius, Rococo Church, Holy Ghost Church, which houses Adam Gottlob Kasparini organ, the famous 18th century organ from 1776, which is still under restoration today. But at that moment, four stops were playable, basically, and I was asked to perform on those 4 stops and tell people, organ music lovers, something about that instrument and about the stops. And I was like a young doctor, you know. Just after my studies in America, we went back to Lithuania and asked the organ builder who was taking care of the tuning. Said, "Will the organ be in tune or ciphers will be fixed, right? No mechanical failures." And he said, "No, everything is fixed and all right." And I started playing, and all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3 notes were sticking, right? And I was so disappointed, frustrated, and I would say angry at that organ builder, right? And I showed it on my face a little bit, right? It was so unprofessional, basically. People were very kind and
Yes.
sort of didn't notice that. But later, when I still played and later relaxed and was in good mood, so to say. But later, years after that, I thought what I should have done was to improvise. Improvise, as you say. Yes, something happens, and that's not my fault. And even perhaps it's not that organ builder's fault. It just happens with old mechanical organs, right? And what do? You either let people down who came to listen to you, to teach, right, or to inspire them, or you can say, "No, I'm too professional to, and I will come back when this is fixed, right? Or I will never come back at all, right? I will go to some place where they have heated organ bench and 2,000 organ pistons, right, without any failures." So that's another option, right? But I'm glad you went to option number one
No,
and said
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
You said yes.
And I mean, for example, once I was also playing for giving a recital in Auckland Town Hall. Now this was before the organ was restored. Now the organ at Auckland Town Hall had about 100 stops, and I hadn't been told that it was in a bad condition. So I had prepared my program, went along to practice in the morning, and when you pressed a piston, okay, the stops would come out, but they wouldn't go back in. They stuck. And I would say 2/3 of the stops were unpredictable. They stuck or went in, or if you pressed it 2 or 3 times, they'd go in. And so I started trying to alter the stops on the pistons so certain stops wouldn't come out. And in the end, it was a nightmare. I rewrote all the stops on the pistons. The gentleman I was staying with came down and altered all the stops on the pistons. And then I had to give this recital, and it was not as good as I'd wanted. It was okay. I busked it, and I got away with it. But I wasn't happy with it because there were about 250 people there. And I thought, I know I could do a better job if the organ had done what it was supposed to. But you know, to put the tuba in, no trombone out. You pull up, the trombone wasn't coming out, you know. And I was constantly having to shout instructions and not concentrate on the music, playing it, you know. It was bad.
It's organist's nightmare to have those things happen.
Yeah.
Probably to be playing and, for example, to see in front of you mixed up pages, right? Instead of page number 2, you have page number 14.
Yeah.
And after that, maybe 7,
Yeah.
right? That happened on this organ too. A few months ago, when Japanese organ was playing, she of course could play from memory everything. So she smiled, and I was one of her assistants, and another lady, my colleague, assisted on the other side. And luckily, we both knew the piece. It was Dorian Toccata by Bach. And luckily, my colleague, luckily turned everything all right and made in order. But that organist, Hiroko Inoue, Japanese organist was her name, played everything like nothing happened. That's the spirit, you see. You still continue going. So I'm glad you did too.
That's right. Yeah.
Wonderful, Charles. So magnificent stories you are telling us. And did you have some fun while unexpected things happened to you in your life? Not only frustrations and nightmares, but fun feeling.
I particularly remember in my youth. I may have mentioned earlier. I was brought up on a 3-manual Harrison and Harrison organ. Now, one day I was there playing, and a chap called Dennis Thurlow came along, who's an organ voicer, and he was playing around with voicing some of the pipes. And I said to him, one of my ambitions, I said to Mr. Thurlow, was I'd like to play the organ at the Royal Albert Hall. Oh, he said, contact Kenneth James, who's at the London division of Harrison and Harrison. So I, at the age of 15, wrote this letter to Kenneth James saying, could I come and play the organ at the Royal Albert Hall? Well, nothing happened, and nothing happened at all. Anyway, about 10 years later, I was going past the Royal Albert Hall. It was a sunny day, hot summer's day, and all the doors of the Albert Hall were open. And I could hear the organ being tuned for a promenade concert. And I'd just been to the Royal College of Organists. I'd been practicing, and I had my organ shoes and my music. And so I thought, So I walked in a side entrance of the Royal Albert Hall, and I was stopped by security. Sorry, sir, you're not allowed in. So I said, it's all right. I said, Mr. James is expecting me. Oh, that's all right, he said. So I went up to the console at the Royal Albert Hall, and I said, are you Kenneth James? I said, Dennis Thurlow told me to contact you to play it. Oh, he said, that's fine, he said. I'll tell you what, he said, we're just having a coffee break, have half an hour.
Uh-huh.
So that was my very, very first time I played the organ at the Royal Albert Hall.
10 years ago from that
That experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I have played it officially in concerts 9 times since. But the first time has that little bit of mischievous about it, I suppose.
Right.
Mischievous it is.
Fantastic. How many manuals does
It's
it
4.
Four,
It's got 4.
manuals.
It was restored about, I'm not sure exactly how many. It was restored about 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They spent a lot of money on it, and because it had 3 blowers, and unfortunately there was not enough wind for it had several 32 foots, both in flue and reeds, and if you pulled them out, all the sound would go. The bellows would collapse.
Bellows, right?
Yeah.
So is the wind system here sufficiently powerful?
It's been sorted now.
Okay. On this organ here in St. John's Church, you might have noticed yesterday while you practiced the fast and loud piece, Žygų toccata, that when you play large chords here and pull out many of the stops, right? Many of the 16-foot stops, then you have some of the insufficient wind supply here.
Yes.
So what I do sometimes is, of course, I try to omit some unnecessary doublings, which only eat up wind, but not do much for the sound and grandeur. Like some of the pedal stops, and because there are some bellows inside, but some of the bellows are very small. 2 bellows are very, very small, and 2 of them are very, very large. And the large bellows serve the pedal division, and the small bellows serve everything else. So that's a little bit of the confusion for the wind system here. So what I do is sometimes I play, release the chords not together, so that I would don't have this specific sound when you release chords and the bellows jump up and down.
Percussion, we call it percussion effect.
Percussion, yeah.
Percussion effect.
So I guess organ builders didn't investigate the physical aspects of the sound enough, and maybe in the future when we will make major repairs, maybe they will make things right with the winding too.
I remember too on one of my trips to New Zealand. It's funny enough, I was returning back from having given 6 recitals across New Zealand, and I was leaving Auckland, and I was on a 747 plane, and it was full, and of course 747 you've got the bubble, first class bubble, and I sat next to this lady and her daughter. As the plane took off, you start to make conversation and say, hello, lovely day, etc. What are you doing? She said, I'm accompanying my husband. So I looked and I couldn't see her husband. Oh no, she said, he's in first class. He's going to London on business. Oh, so I jokingly said, wouldn't mind swapping places. Anyway, as the plane took off, within 5 to 10 minutes, this lady suddenly became ill. So much so, one of the stewardesses had to bring oxygen down in a bottle to her, and this stewardess said to me, she said, would you mind, sir, swapping places with this lady's husband who's in first class? It's a true story. And I said, yeah, okay, I don't mind at all. Anyway, I inquired after his health, her health, when I got to London. I was in the first class bubble all the way to London. And I had a lot of refreshment, one might say.
And was the lady all right afterwards?
Yes, she was. But it's just very funny how that little coincidence happened.
Right.
But I did enjoy the refreshment available in first class. It didn't stop. I had a very good trip.
Do you remember any very refined but very small instruments, not with 4 manuals, but maybe 1 manual and a few stops you enjoyed playing in your life?
I do. once, many years ago, I took a group of school children to cycle around Holland. And we were staying in a youth hostel, and next to, I can't remember the name of the place, but next to this youth hostel was a church. So I said to there's a lady leader with us too, there are only 12 who were cycling, so I said, look, are you okay to look after the youngsters while I'm just literally next door? Mm-hmm. She said, no problem. So I went next door and I sat on this organ, and each stop was a gem, mm-hmm. and I just played and played and played, and I hadn't got a watch on me or phone. And apparently I'd been playing for 2 hours, and she came to get me. She said, oh, I said, I'm really sorry. I said, but this organ is so beautiful. Every stop you could play all the notes, and oh.
You know what I can't understand often? When organists say, oh, this organ is so small, you can't play solo pieces, right? Only with singers, with instruments, only accompaniment, chamber music, right? For solo recitals, forget it, people will be bored if you play it for an hour. But as you say, you can play for hours without end on such a lovely stops, right? You don't need to change stop, because the acoustics will do other things with it, beautiful, and especially if the stop again is very fine quality and it speaks like a person, right? Every pipe is like another human being, right? So I'm glad you had this experience too, when you forget passing of time and sit on the organ bench and just play for hours, right? I had this experience too, fantastic.
And on another occasion, I was with an oboist actually, Hugh Somerville, who's actually became a vet. But this guy was about 21, and we went round Denmark. We gave 6 concerts at organ and oboe, and it was very strange actually. We played in this little tiny church with a small organ, talking about small organs. But next door to this church was a restaurant, and I noticed through the window of this restaurant was a Yamaha piano. Mm-hmm. And I said to Hugh, I said, look, why don't we see if we can play for our supper? And which musicians often do. If they have a good meal for playing, they'll often do that. And so we went and we chatted and said, yeah, if you would like to play for my guests, he said, I'll give you dinner. So we played. We gave a little hour's concert for his guests, and afterwards we had the most fantastic meal. Really, really lovely. I mean, it was an exceptionally fine meal with different wines for each meal and course and so on. And I said to Hugh, I said, this is no ordinary restaurant. I said, there's something unusual about this place. And I made inquiries. I wrote down the name of the restaurant, and I made inquiries later on, further down the line when we were doing further into Denmark. And they said, where have you played? I can't remember its name now. It's something in. He said, you played there? I said, yes. He said, do you know, he said, the waiting list to go there for a meal is over 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
And they're only open 3 months in every year. And the chef of that restaurant is an international judge. He goes all around the world judging food in every country. And you have had a meal at that restaurant? I said, yes. He said, well done on you. He said, you just can't get there.
It's like in organ experience, it's like going to another country, right? And going to a lovely church, and you don't know anything about the church. Oh, and you heard organ music. You hear organ music played, and you listen to that in the pews for maybe half an hour, right? The organist maybe was just practicing, and you were transported to another world through these 30 minutes, right? And afterwards, you were so compelled maybe to clap and thank the organist. Maybe you go up to the balcony. It turns out that this person is an international master, right? Yeah. Working in this lovely small church. Could be, could happen, right? Or even you don't know that person, but the reputation of his might be very, very great. So fantastic. It's great that you had this lovely experience in Denmark.
Oh, gorgeous! They're beautiful instruments. And I played the organ at. The organ is I think it's a big 4 manual, but it's got not only mechanical action but assisted mechanical action, so it's part pneumatic as well. Harderslave. I don't know if you know Harderslave Cathedral. Harderslave Cathedral has got this wonderful 4 manual instrument that's got, there's a word for it, which has got assisted tracker. So it's pneumatic. So the pneumatic side assists the tracker, and it's the best of both worlds. And wow, what an instrument!
Fantastic.
That was a lovely instrument. And there was another part was an organ in a place called Zonderborg, which was part of a hospital chapel. And this was a small organ, but it was so beautiful. It was hard tiles, and the walls were very hard, but the acoustics just made it so gorgeous.
Oh, fantastic, Charles. Tell me, what are you working on right now? What music do you play in addition to Bach and Gigoux?
Okay, I like French music. I like César France music, and I like to play music. If I give a concert or a recital, I like to give a recital where I know the people hopefully will come back again. So I like to tell stories. I always give a recital where I can tell stories.
Oh, you interact with the audience?
Yes.
That's a very powerful way to leave impact on the people, to give them something to think about while music was being played. Of course, program notes might be another tool when you write down things, but it's never the same as storytelling.
I love storytelling, and I go usually armed with some photographs, memorabilia of some concerts, and tell stories around the music that I play, or say this has happened. And there is a wonderful piece, I don't know if you know it, called Elegy by Thorben Ball. Have you heard of it?
Now I have.
Okay.
Great.
But it's a very, very beautiful piece, and it was written about 50 years ago. I'll have to try and give you a way of getting hold of it. But this piece is so beautiful and so English. It is unmistakably English because it needs the diapason sound and so on. And I have played it a lot in America, but it has a lovely story attached in that Thorben Ball was giving a live radio broadcast on the BBC. And I say this was about 50 years ago. And he was giving this live radio broadcast, and he had about 3 minutes left to the end of the broadcast, and it was those days where they couldn't just fill in. They said, you must keep playing. So Thorben said, I will improvise. And he improvised the most beautiful, beautiful piece, which was, everybody wrote in and said, what is it? We want it. And it was Elegy. And so it's just the most beautiful piece of music.
Fantastic. And did he later wrote down?
Yeah, it's all published.
Transcribed.
It's all published.
Great. When you tell stories for your audience, do you have some challenges to deal with in that situation, or is it very relaxed?
It depends if for example, when I've been in Germany or Italy, I have given recitals in Italy, I have always tried to get translations, and because of having studied some Italian and German, I will always try and tell the story and get some help, but I'll always try and tell a story in their language.
In Italian?
Yes.
That's a very powerful way too. Imagine going to Japan and speaking in Japanese.
Well, I've never done that. I've never done Japan. But that would be a challenge.
People usually love if you speak just a little bit of their language.
That's right.
Just a few phrases.
That's right.
And sometimes Japanese organists come here, and I know just enough of the phrases to make them happy. But that's enough, right? Yeah. And it's very powerful. Sometimes I suggest to the greeters here in the church who greet the tourists to greet the tourists in their language, for example. That would make their day, right? fantastic. And what is inspiring to you now, Charles, that you are thinking ahead of the future and thinking about your next plans, next moves in organ world? What is inspiring to you?
I think I've had a little bit of time off playing. I did go and play in Australia last August. I gave a recital at Fremantle on a very, very big instrument, one of the biggest in Australia. But as I'm now pulling out of doing full-time teaching in schools, I perhaps will get back to time to do some, like any career, we have swings and roundabouts.
Right.
Certain areas might be playing the piano more, playing the organ more, accompanying or taking choirs. I would like to try and get back into doing more organ playing. So, and then I should probably start doing some more recital work again. I'd like to do some more tours. And if you've got things to work for, that motivates me. I will work very hard for a tour.
Right, because when you organize the tour and you know that deadline is looming, and you know that there are people who are counting on you, right?
Yes.
You know that you have to show up every morning or every night to practice, right? That is a powerful motivator for any organist, I guess. So I really recommend, and people probably will get out of our discussion here, that they should set up deadlines, right, their own, right?
That's
set
right.
up a concert in their church.
Yeah. It makes you. It does.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. It makes you do something, and I like to play another instrument. I mean, I've played quite a bit with oboists, but I've also played with flautists and trumpeters too. Organ and trumpet is a good one.
Right, because it reminds of the reed stops and it blends together. If you don't use the trumpet on the organ, it can be a solo. But if you do use the trumpet on the organ, it will be like a duet.
That's right.
With the solo instrument. Fantastic. Any closing thoughts, Charles? I know we are short of time, and you have been so generous with your ideas, insights. What would you wish our listeners? Let me put it this way: what would you wish you knew when you were little, that nobody told you, and you only found out tens of years, decades ago, later? Can you give us that? Wish or inspiration?
I think it's to explore the many different organs and to understand them, because everything is enrichment to the life, to one's life, to actually experience all the different organs, and they are so different. I've been fortunate to travel, or I've been around the world 10 times now, and I've been fortunate enough to play organs in many countries, and it's enrichment, and it gives you, it does enrich you to say, well, I want to try that sort of music where it should be played, like French music on French instruments, German on German, and so on, because it gives you that motivation to want to learn that music, to play it on that instrument.
Yes, and to stay curious probably about new stops, new experiences, right? Every organ is unique, right? Every
question. Because all acoustics are different in the churches, all the stops are different, all the organs are different, they're voiced differently, and it's even more diverse than pianos. I mean, I've played a lot of fine grand pianos, but they're all different, but every organ is more diversely different.
Definitely. So thank you so much, Charles, for your wonderful time. And for conclusion, can you give us a link where people can connect with you online, maybe get in touch with you and your work, maybe get to know more about you?
If people wish to email me, they can. My email address is Chaz, but please call me Charles, not Chaz. Chaz.Spanner, SPANNER @gmail.com.
I will make sure I'll put that into the description of the podcast.
All lowercase.
Lowercase, okay. Yeah. Wonderful. You have a wonderful creative year ahead of you. Stay in good health.
Thank you, and yourself too.
Thank you so much, and continue to be curious and explore new organs.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful, and thank you for letting me play the organ here at St. John's.
It's a pleasure. Let's keep in touch.
It's been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.io. where you will find lots of insights, practical advice and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevicius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.